Okay, are you ready to get started with question one that we have here?
Sure. I've got my coffee. I'm ready to get this show on the road.
Good. The first question is, how can an employer address an extended period of sickness absence during an employee's probationary period while ensuring compliance with employment laws?
Okay, and so I hear this question an awful lot. I think there are a couple of common myths when dealing with sort of these challenges that plague the sector. I think that everyone's more than familiar with the fact that an individual that is less than 2 years service wouldn't have the lawful ability to complain for unfair dismissal. And so a lot of people think that terminating a member of staff that is less than 2 years service is without risk, and it's simply not true. I think the real key factor here is the cause for sickness. So naturally, we're going to have people that do run into, common colds, or, they wake up, they're just not feeling right, and things of that variety. Equally, there are other causes for sickness that are protected by the Equality Act of 2010. And in having that protection brings with it the potential for disability discrimination, which is to suffer a detriment and or dismissal on the basis of their ability or the failure by the employer to provide reasonable adjustments. And so ascertaining the cause for the sickness will more often than not determine the process in which we follow. I think there are certain advantages to perpetuating a short service dismissal for those that are less than 2 years service, but equally it does also bring with it drawbacks as well. So in an instance whereby the individual is protected by the Equality Act and their disability is protected, well, if we were to short service dismiss, typically that is pretty much an exit from the business within one meeting. The difficulty then becomes if that manifests itself, in the form of a claim and an employment tribunal claim, it becomes very difficult for the employer to disprove the allegations. It's very reminiscent of almost like a math equation. It's okay getting the correct answer, but if we don't articulate or show our working out, that's where the problem comes at an employment tribunal, because ultimately that burden of proof is reversed and you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. And so sometimes following a bit more of a structured process, whether that be medical capability, whatever it might be, for those that naturally are protected by the Equality Act, makes it far easier to then defend that claim, simply because we can aptly separate the two issues, the contentious issue being potentially the protected characteristic and the fact that we have a clear conduct/capability issue with repeat absenteeism. Now, in following a full process, again, you can separate the two and say, well, actually, this has nothing to do with disability discrimination. Here's why we did what we did. Here's how we reached that outcome. And as such, this is an entirely lawful reason for dismissal. So I would always recommend for anyone going through any termination process potentially with an individual, even if they are within that probationary period, to seek competent employment law advice to, again, ascertain the cause for sickness, where does the risk come along with this, which is going to be the correct process in which we follow, and that would always be my recommendation. Just as on a separate note, I feel that in 99.9% of the issues that I've ever advised on, there is always a way to reach the employer's desired outcome. And equally, you could roll the dice and short service dismiss, even if they are protected, if they aren't protected, and in some cases, that doesn't go to an employment tribunal. But in doing that, we just need to be conscious that it is extremely risky, certainly if they are protected, and disability discrimination complaints are extremely expensive. You probably won't see one for less than £30,000-40,000, and if you take that chance over and over and over again, more often than not, it does become a matter of time. So again, always seek advice, and again, there is light at the end of the tunnel if you do find yourself in a situation like that.
Fantastic. Thank you for that really insightful answer. I'm sure that's going to provide clarity to many of our watchers today.